Roy has been fishing a selection of patterns: dry fly, emerger and pupa, whilst fishing loch style from a drifting boat. Spooning a trout, he discovers the fish have been feeding mostly on pupa or emergers. Such information is important in determining the fly patterns to be used and in varying the technique.
What I've got here is a size 10 ridge hook. A size 10 or a size 12 would be the right size. And I'm going to tie in 2 ribs. One is a very fine silver wire, and the other is some very fine jewel mylar. So that's the silver gone in. This is a very fine mylar, which is kind of a plastic tinsel, really. That's all it is. It's gold one side, silver the other. So if you tie it in by the gold side facing you, as soon as you start to turn it, the silver shows, which is exactly what you want. That's just tying silk that I've tied it in with. Go well round the bend and then just bring the silk back up, because that's all the body material is. And the idea with this fly is that you tie it up nice and thin. You just bring it almost the way to the head where the thorax starts. And the first rib is the mylar, and we rib up in the opposite direction to the way the silk went on. I'll just tie that in. Just trim it off. And then the silver rib, the silver wire rib, goes over the top of that. And that goes in the same direction that the silk first went in. What that does is that just reinforces the mylar a little bit to stop the trout's teeth from digging into it. But it also gives a sort of silvery crisscross effect. So that's the first stage with the
I'm using orange
complete.
Three thicknesses of floss. And what I'm going to do is tie that underneath the fly in 2 halves, sticking out of the sides of the dressing. So that's just tied in there. And for the thorax, I'm going to use 3 strands of peacock herl, and then twist the strands around the silk, like so. So I was just winding the peacock herl to make a fairly bulky thorax. Just tie that in. Just trim those off. And then bring the floss round, the orange floss, as wing buds either side of the thorax. Just trim that off. And the next one. And that orange becomes a target point for the trout, because they know that the natural pupa shows orange just before it's about to hatch. And the last thing to do is to just finish the head off and just whip finish with the black silk. Trim off and varnish, and that's the pupa.
There are 2 quite distinct methods of fishing the duckfly pupa. The slim pupa pattern is fished virtually static at depth, casting long and using fine leader, allowing considerable time for the fly to reach the bottom. Trout will frequently take on the drop as the fly is descending. However, it's more normal for them to take the ascending fly as they cruise along close to the bottom. The second method, which Roy is using here, is to fish the pupa close to the surface, using a pupa pattern with a more developed thorax, having carefully prepared and degreased the leader. He's fishing one dropper about 8 feet from the point fly. This allows him to fish effectively at 2 different levels. He keeps in close contact by having his rod tip close to the water surface and uses the slight memory in his fly line as a bite indicator. He chooses a sheltered piece of water behind a small island where there are duckfly emerging, retrieving at a slow, steady pace, slightly quicker than what he imagines the natural pupa move at.
There we are. A pretty big one.
Now, this fish is something of an acrobat. Fish leaping clear of the water are hard to control and frequently manage to shake the hook free. Roy uses a 10-foot graphite fly rod rated 6 to 8. His fly line is a weight-forward number 6 line, and leader material, normally 4 to 6 pound breaking strain, varies depending upon the style of fishing he's doing. He's an intense dislike of being broken by fish and is a firm believer that you use as strong a leader as conditions for disguise allow. Remember that Corrib water can be exceptionally clear, and extra money spent on tippet material is well worth it in difficult conditions. Some of the new materials are difficult to knot, so practice well before going fishing. Corrib can be a challenging lake at times, so be well prepared. Duckfly are particularly vulnerable to being eaten by trout as they emerge, either immediately below the surface or when they're actually in the surface film. They have to spend some time, usually more than 10 seconds, static on the surface as they break free of their pupa case or shuck. In the process, they pump blood to their wings, which gives them a vivid, hot orange color. This must act as a beacon to the trout, which feed eagerly on the emerger at this stage. Having shaken free of its shuck, the orange color rapidly disappears, and the fly assumes the characteristic black and white color of the adult.
Emerging buzzer. This is the stage after the pupa when it's up on the surface and it's just about to break out, or just has broken out into the top surface of the water. Size 10 midge hook again and black thread. The first thing I'm going to tie in here is a piece of gold and silver mylar, which I've tapered down because that gives a more realistic effect for a rib along the body of the emerger. And it tapers as you come closer towards the head. So that's tied in now. The next thing to tie in is some goose or swan herl dyed black, and that is the body material. And you take half a dozen strands or so of this material, tie it in at the rear end, and just bring the silk back, wind it towards the head. And you just wind the goose hurl up the body. This gives a slightly thicker body that's sort of fluffy, leaving plenty of space at the top end of the dressing, because there's lots more elements to go on here. And we wind in the opposite direction the rib up the body, closer turns towards the back end, opening up the turns of ribbing as you get close towards the thorax. So that's the first stage complete. And just tying the ribbing in, like so. Just trim that off. And the next element are the wings, which have just come out of the case, and for that we use 2 blue dun tips. That's blue dun dyed cock. That's one tied in. And the idea here is to just get them in a V shape, slightly divided, and just trailing over the back of the insect. So those are tied in. And trim those off. And over the top of that, we're now going to put the wing case, made of a pad of black goose hurl. Just tie that in on top of the thorax, like so. The thorax itself is hot orange seal's fur, and again it's that orange colour which is the target point for the trout. As soon as they see that, it's a great attractor. And what we're trying to do is to put a little bit of that orange in all of the Duckfly patterns. So that's the silk dubbed onto the tying silk. And just build the head up. Like so. And bring the case over the top. That's our black pearl. And just trim that off. And the last element is a fiery brown cock hackle at the front, fairly sparse. Just enough to keep the fly up in the water. This will be used as a top dropper fly, whereas the last one, that would be used for the point or the middle dropper. Just tie that in at the head. Just a few turns round. Just tie that off. And then the last thing is to just build the head up in front of the hackle. Just whip finish and varnish. That's the fly complete. There's the wings across the back in V shape, and a segmented abdomen, hot orange body with a wing case, and the fiery brown hackle at the front. Very, very effective emerging pattern for Corrib, and that's the orange emerger.